All right, what's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of Elite Physique University. I'm excited to be here for another week, chatting all things bodybuilding and physique enhancement. I'm Kayla, one of your co-hosts, and I'm here with John this week as Jason's out of town. So we decided it would be a great time to answer some questions from our listeners that we commonly get as coaches. So before we go into that, though, John, how's your week been? Anything
Well,
new?
it's been good. It's been good. It's even better now because guess what? You're hosting the show and I can just chill out and have a drink and sip on my BCAAs over here and get ready to go train, and I can just answer questions. So I'm super excited. What are you drinking on over there?
I have these like Zions like energy drinks. They're really good. They're not like a ton of energy, like caffeine. Sorry.
Yeah.
So only like 160 instead of like 300. So it's a nice, like perfect little like mid-afternoon snack.
Yeah, well, everyone's used to seeing me crack a white trash monster, and they're only like the white ones are only like 160. So I'm changing it up a little bit today. I'm having some aminos and some keto salts and stuff like that. But as far as me, my week has been great. So I bought a Tesla. So I bought a Model 3, the high performance edition. Really just kind of went all out, and with gas prices being like $4 to $5 right now, I'm pretty excited about that. So that's being delivered in a week. So I just got my charger installed and all that. But I wanted to catch everybody up because we've been gone for 6 months, and I don't like to try and make this like, an infomercial for Fat Muscle Project or any of that, but we've dropped some supplements that some people may not be aware of. So this one's called Performance Fuel, and you'll see Leslie is on the label. She's a little badass. So she's deadlifting like 315 or something right there. But basically it's intra workout carbs. And we're really super excited because all my athletes, all my bodybuilders, they all drink carbs during their workout. So it's a blend of dextrose, waxy maize, and cyclic dextrins. That way you get the fast spike from the dextrose and you get a nice sustained release from the waxy maize. Sorry, not waxy maize. Jesus. I was just talking about waxy maize. Maltodextrin. We were just talking about why we don't like waxy maize. So it's maltodextrin, dextrose, and cyclic dextrins. And that's been popular, and we just launched that. And then another product that we dropped, it's called Complete Meal Replacement. And Cliff Wilson, one of our sponsored coaches, he's a friend of the show. He's been on numerous times, one of the best coaches in the industry. We designed this together. So this is cool. It's got whey protein, it's got oat powder, and we blended it to where one scoop would be 20 carbs, 20 protein, and 5 fats, which seems to be about right for most females. So if they just want to do one scoop as a meal replacement when they're dieting, that's perfect. If you're a guy, you can do 2 scoops and get 40 protein, 40 carbs, 10 fats. And we just designed it in a way to be easy on your gut. And it's been selling like crazy. So that's pretty much been, the big things for me is, we're trying to push new products and do new things with Fat Muscle. And the other thing is I just launched my book, the Knowledge Bomb of the Day book, and it almost sold out in the first day. So like it was a big day. So that's me in a week. I'm constantly just pushing, trying to do new stuff, normal client check-ins and all that stuff. But, that's my week in a nutshell without boring everybody to death. What about you? What's new with you this week?
Well, dang. I was going to say, though, yes, that meal replacement powder sounds awesome because, like, as a female, it's hard to find those shakes because usually they're like 400 calories for one scoop. So it's like, even if, you're in prep or something, or just dieting and don't want to miss a meal, but you're on the plane or something like that, that's something super easy that you could take with you.
And the other thing too, like we see a lot of, a friend of ours, Jeff Sue, he coined the term Frankenstein foods, a lot of protein bars and stuff like, and listen, I'm not opposed to protein bars, but they cause a lot of gut health issues. And I know we have a question going over that today, so we'll get more into that, but we wanted to basically build this to where it was so easy on your gut. You have no distension, but the really fine oat powder was really, really key for that, and keeping it mostly a whey isolate was key. So you're right. So anyway, back to you. What's new with you this week?
Yeah. I just got on my new training program from Jason. So he kicked my ass this week. So that was fun. And then I just signed on a few more clients this week. For some reason, everyone's looking for powerlifting right now. They kind of came in waves, which is interesting, but there is a meet coming up here in October. So everyone wants to kind of get in on that. So signing on a couple clients, and then we're just getting ready, my fiance and I, for our wedding coming up in about 30 days. So we're doing a destination wedding in Malibu, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So
That's
excited for that.
awesome. That's awesome. So a lot of people, I help them diet, and you're in a mini cut, if I remember right, correct?
Yep. Yep.
A lot of people, mini cuts are one thing, but a lot of people are like dieting for shows, and they're doing a lot of the harder phases of dieting while trying to get ready for a wedding. And stress is through the roof. How's your dieting been with getting ready for a wedding? Has it not really been an issue? Has everything been going okay, or is stress a little bit because you got all the planning and the things to juggle? Has dieting been pretty easy through this process?
So far, yeah. Jason cut my calories a little bit more this week. So I'm not like starving by any means, and I still get like a free meal every week. So it's not like stressful by any means, like a bodybuilding prep is. We're taking it slow, just like cardio little by little as we go. Like no like extra like fat burners or anything like that needed right now. So, and with me, like I'm very type A and like overachiever. So for the wedding stuff, I pretty much have everything done. So that helps. Pretty much now it's just like, okay, how many days do we have left? And we just go from there. So it hasn't really been that bad. We have about 8 to 10 weeks of cutting to go, I'm sure. So it'll be also continue cutting after the wedding for a little bit, just for myself. It's time for a good like reset and everything for body composition and stuff after my Met Comp phase that I was going through.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Well, very cool. And early congratulations. We'll have to make sure we give you a shout out whenever that time comes and we're recording the podcast. So we'll make sure that you get some time off too for anything you guys are going to do afterwards. So we've got questions today, right? Like what are we doing? What's going on?
Yeah. So we had a bunch of questions come in from our listeners. So we picked the most common ones or the ones that overlap. So we'll just kind of get started with that.
Okay, cool.
So first question talks about keto. John, I know like you're the master of keto for here. I haven't done keto a ton, but how do you set up your clients for keto? Because I know you take a very different approach from most other coaches. So can you explain how you set that up for people?
Yeah. And this is something, I think we did a podcast on keto, but it wasn't necessarily the podcast that I feel like we need to do. I think we need to do a full, complete breakdown. I did one with the Ace of Spada podcast that I really enjoyed. I think we should do one here in the future because there's a lot of misconceptions with keto, and keto is an absolutely great tool to use. It's a very hard lifestyle diet. I'm actually doing keto myself right now. Every 2-3 years, I'll go through a pretty good long cut, and long as in like anything longer than 8 weeks of keto is long because you can't have carbs, right? So there's a lot of misconceptions with keto. And the way that I've learned over the years to set it up is in a way to help people get through the process of ketogenic dieting. So with that being said, you'll see a lot of mistakes to make. And I want to talk about those too. And then I'll tell you how I set it up, and it'll give our listeners numbers. So like you guys listening, you'll be able to take these numbers and go apply it. So the first mistake I see people make is their protein is way too high because we're bodybuilders, right? So like Kayla, you, for example, like keto with 150 grams of protein a day, your lean mass is closer to 100 than it is 150, obviously, right? Yep. So what I've noticed is with bodybuilders, high protein is great. Like you could probably even 180 grams a day and it's not going to hurt anything, right? It's not going to cause fat gain. But on a ketogenic diet, if protein needs are there, you want to make sure it's based off of lean mass. And a lot of bodybuilders want to have like 1 gram per pound or even higher. So what happens is protein, if it's too high on a keto diet, it starts to turn over into carbs. It's called gluconeogenesis, right? So if it's too high, that happens. So at one point I had to figure it out, like what's too low, what's too high. And what I settled on was protein at 1 gram per pound of lean mass. So 1 pound of muscle is, you pair that up with your protein intake. So Kayla, say you have 120 pounds of lean muscle, or any female, right? You'd have 120 grams of protein a day. And that seems to be enough to at least recover. And it's not too much to where you start feeling the keto flu symptoms, where you have the slight headache and you feel like you're just dragging ass and you don't have energy. And the keto flu is a common thing. Well, the number one cause that I see if someone's not eating carbs, it's their protein is too high. And that's for physique enhancement enthusiasts. So if you're listening, step one, Figure out your lean mass. Listen, use one of those handheld electronic devices. I don't care. Like it's going to get you somewhat close, and set your protein up there. So for me, it's about 180. I have 180 grams of protein a day, and I feel great on that. So that's always the first step. The second step, now we have carbs and fats left, is you need to figure out your carbs for the day. And most of those need to just be fibrous veggies or fiber or a combination, right? It's all kind of the same.
Right.
Avocados are my favorite. Like a large avocado is going to be somewhere around 20 grams of fiber, 15 to 20 grams of fiber. And I get a lot of my fiber that way. And then I'll have some veggies to kind of pick the rest up to get me about 30 grams of fiber a day. But you don't want to add carbs here, and you don't want to use foods that have a lot of trace carbs. So there will be things like some of the cool whey protein powders, like that have, different forms of protein, like blended proteins. They're going to be higher in carbs. You might get like 7 grams of carbs per scoop in some of these protein products that are out there. Ours aren't like that. Jason's aren't like that, but some have a lot, right? So that stuff adds up. If you're doing, 3 scoops of protein a day, you're getting like 20 some odd grams of trace carbs that are going to impact blood sugar. So you want to make sure that you set your carbs in a way to where females, I like to have them have 30 total carbs a day coming from trace carbs, and fiber make up most of that. Guys, anywhere between 30 and 40 a day. And if you're eating low to no carb foods, protein and fats, then that's not a problem. So eggs, chicken, beef, like whey protein isolate's going to have ours has 1 carb. There's a lot that are 0. Just make sure it's super pure and not a lot of carbs. The other thing that gets people into trouble is a ton of peanut butter or a ton of nuts. Right. And there's fiber in that, but the trace carbs start to creep up if you're somebody that just wants to eat peanut butter 6 times a day because you're obsessed. Vary your fats. Eggs, 0 carbs. Oils, 0 carbs. Bacon and stuff like that. Cheese, there might be a couple, 2 or 3, but that's the thing. You've got to keep that down. And then, sweeteners, things like coffee creamer, you can have fat-free coffee creamer, but there might be 5 carbs in it. All these little things add up. If you're chewing a pack of gum a day, there's 20 carbs right there. Sure, it's sugar alcohol, but it impacts blood sugar, which impacts being in a ketogenic state. So normally if I see people have problems and their protein's good, it's the little things like the added Splenda or the trace carbs. You need to keep those very, very low. And then you get to fats, and that's the end of it. Now you make up the rest of your calories with fats. Now you just fill in the blanks. So 1 gram of protein per pound of lean mass, that's step 1. Very low carbs, mostly fiber. That's step 2. 30 if you're a female, 40 if you're a guy, somewhere in that range. And step 3 is however many calories you're going to have. And we can't answer that, right? Because that's a whole other podcast. So you just need to know what calories you're set at. Then you make up the rest of your calories and you plug that in for fats. So for me, 2,500 calories is about 180 protein, 30, 40, 50 trace carbs, and about 150 to 180 fats, depending on what I'm going to do that day. And that's how I set it up. So a lot of the researchers, I can tell you, huge mistake. Researchers are not physique enthusiasts. They're not coaches. They're researching numbers, and they don't understand muscle gain, muscle loss, muscle retention. And they don't understand there's a wide range of calories. So Kayla, will use you as an example, or someone that's dieting. Researchers say we'll get 20% of your calories, and that's where you set your protein. So take your calories and do 20%, and that's protein. Now take 5% of your total calories, that's your carbs, and then 75% of your calories should be fat. Well, and I love researchers. I love Bill Campbell, and I love Brad Schoenfeld. We're all really good friends, right? And they understand this, but a lot of people don't in the ketogenic community. If you're a female eating 1,200 calories and you want to try going keto to get the rest of your body fat down for a show, 20% of that, you're going to be eating half the protein that you need to take in, right? You're never going to recover. And this is bodybuilding. So protein, that's why it's always step 1. You've got to set it high enough. Or if you're eating a massive amount of calories and you take 20% and set, 20% of your high calories in the off season, you want to do a keto reset, all of a sudden your protein's way too high. So that's a big mistake. Never, ever use percentages, because it's all very, variable based on the calories that you're taking in. So I hope that makes sense. I hope people got those 3 steps down. And if you want to try a ketogenic diet, that's it. And what I recommend people do, one final thing before we move on to the next question. I don't recommend going straight from, like, if you're going to do an insulin sensitivity reset or a mini cut, kind of like what I'm doing. I don't recommend you go from very high carbs straight to keto, because it takes you a while to deplete the glycogen out of your muscles and your liver and things like that. And that's how you get into a ketogenic state. I recommend spending 10 to 14 days, lower your carbs around your workout first, raise your fats, keep the same calories. That's going to deplete the muscle and the liver a little bit. And then you transition after 2 weeks of that. Then you drop the carbs out completely and you go keto. And you're looking at transitioning in about 4 days, 4 to 5 days, you'll be in a completely ketogenic state. But if you're trying to do it from high carbs, like, you're going to have the keto flu, you're going to have headaches, you're going to feel like shit, and you're going to feel like that for a few days. So it's always good to transition to low carbs first. Yeah. I try to get all that in and not put us behind, because I know we've got a bunch of other good questions. Are we good to go to the next one, or did that spark any other questions that you could think of?
I mean, I definitely have more questions, but I think, like you said, we should definitely just do another episode on this, because, like, I've never done a ton of keto, and like what you explained about, like, you know, the percentages being too low or too high for protein, I've seen a lot of that. So we should definitely just do another episode on this and deep dive into it, because I could go on for a long time.
Let's do that, because I know you keep track of everything. Because think about all the topics we could talk to. We could talk about a ketogenic off season. And why being limited on protein, like, can you put on the same amount of muscle versus?
That was one of my questions. Yep.
Yeah. Well, if protein, if you can't get it as high as you can, now we automatically, if we think about it, if you did a ketogenic off season, you wouldn't be able to grow as much, because your protein wouldn't be as high as normal on a carb-based diet. So there's a lot of cool things that we can really delve into, and health markers and things like that. So we'll definitely do something like that in the future.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's awesome. But yeah, no, speaking of, you know, off season and growing and stuff like that, like, we both work with lots of athletes, and sometimes when we eat all that food, we have some gut issues that happen. So a question came in, is like, what's the most common complaint, you know, with gut issues that tends to happen with us? I know for myself with this one, I get lots of people with bloating issues. So bloating is a very, like, umbrella term. And it covers a lot of different things. Like, a lot of people come in, they're like, oh, I have IBS. And it's like, it's an umbrella term. It's not like a specific diagnosis of anything. So I basically will take them through a whole questionnaire that I have to pinpoint exactly, like, where that bloating is coming from, because they could have low stomach acid is a really big one, just because of all the protein that they're eating. So then they have low digestive enzymes, which can't break down the food to absorb it. So then everyone just feels like they have a big rock in their stomach, basically, and then they're lethargic, they're like low energy, just sleeping all the time, and they're just wondering why, you know, now they're just getting fat, versus they're like, I'm eating all the right things and stuff. But, you know, when you just eat a very plain, like, chicken and rice, and don't have a lot of those, like, FODMAP foods, or, you know, high fiber veggies and things like that, it can really, really mess up your gut, actually. So that's a lot of things that I get usually with clients that we work on first before we kind of go into any kind of cutting, growing phase. I usually get them figured out as far as, like, where their gut issues are happening. So usually I'll just go a low FODMAP diet and reduce inflammation, give them some kind of, like, glutamine, aloe, and zinc. I learned that from Jason.
Cheap version. That's a cheap way to do it. It's great.
Yeah, super easy. It's like, you know, just take it in the morning and at night, depending on the severity of stuff. Sometimes I'll have them do it with other meals too. Otherwise, I do use the Utilize from NuEthix as well for digestive enzymes. And then we just work on that and, like, getting, you know, the bloating to come down, inflammation to come down, and then we start working calories back up. So typically that's how I work with my athletes and people that come in with some gut stuff.
Yeah, and I'm actually looking up the episode number 2, because we did a complete gut health episode, and I can't remember if we did part 1 and part 2 with Vince Pitstick. Him and Jason really went into detail, so I'm going to look for that, and I'll drop that here in just a minute. But you know, I was telling you before the show started, I hate fixing gut issues. Like, as a coach, I hate it, because it can be so. And I'm not talking about the work on my end. It can just be so frustrating at times, like trying to pinpoint what's going on, SIBO, and just all these leaky gut, and like all this different stuff. And a lot of the times I can at least get someone to have some improvement by adding glutamine, like we carry that. So it's nice for my clients. I'm like, here, it's right here on fatmuscleproject.com. Get glutamine and add, 1 scoop is 5 grams. I haven't, at least before and after the workout, because it's easy to remember there, but like even up to 4 times a day, if they're having really bad issues. But, just cleaning up the foods, like you said, and going with a low FODMAP approach. And if anybody wants to listen, or if anybody's listening and they're curious, like you can Google that. There's different versions of low FODMAP, but, just cleaning the diet up and getting rid of a lot of sweeteners and moving away from dairy and gluten just for a little bit. And listen, I know not everybody has issues, but if you're having gut issues, it's good to remove things like that and then see how much improvement you have. And I'll just be honest. I think a lot of people make this more complicated than it is, because I think if you just clean things up for a while, I think people are just eating a lot of shit and it literally becomes a shit storm, and they're eating protein bars twice a day and like tons of sorbitol and like all these things. And it's like,
all these like bodybuilder friendly foods that's like, got to eat big to get big. But it's like, okay, if you're not eating the right things, you're just going to mess up your gut and it can't absorb anything. And you're just like digging yourself a hole then.
So. Yeah, it's just, it's such a mess. But like I said, we did a whole complete episode, and I'm looking for it now with Vince Pitstick. But I mean, how much of that do you fix on your end? Like what percentage of your clients do you feel like you have to take time to fix?
I would say at least half of them. I mean, like I said, I have a lot of younger people right now. First getting into it. So a lot of them have tried things on their own, have never done it. So sometimes it's just getting them to eat the right kinds of foods. Sometimes like I had a client who was eating like bodybuilding. He was trying to train to come and do a show, and he was eating all the things. But he just started having like really bad bowel movements and like really bad gas and stuff. And so we switched up stuff. And then I figured out that, because of that bad, like really smelly gas, he might've been having some issue with his liver processing it and high sulfur proteins. So I actually switched out his protein sources, and that cleared it right up. So sometimes it's a lot of different things that can happen. Like you said, trial and error sometimes. And for me, that's the fun part to figure out. Like, I think that's super fun to just see how everyone's different. But yeah, it's person to person. It just depends.
Yeah. So this was episode 13. We did a complete gut health episode with Vince Pitstick. So if you guys go back to 13, it's in our archives. It's easy to find. That was a really good podcast. And we had a lot of people follow up that wanted a part 2. I just can't remember if we did, because now it's been a while. Like that was 2 years ago we did that. So, good old gut health. The most, complicating thing to solve if people can't stick to a diet. That's the other thing too, is like you try and fix things and it's like you just put a brand new floor in your house, but somebody keeps walking in with muddy shoes. It's like, listen, like I can't keep this clean if you're going to keep walking in with muddy shoes. Like I've had to help people so many times with issues that then they go and they fuck up on the diet and they're cheating on the diet and they're drinking on the weekends. It's like, but they're still complaining, well, this isn't working. Well, no, you're not following the plan.
Yeah, it's like we only have to do this for like just a small period of time. Like just give me this time and then we'll be better, I promise. So yeah, that's probably the hardest part to deal with, is just getting them to understand like we need to follow this like 100% right away. Yeah. So, but yeah, otherwise, ready for the next one?
I am ready. What do we got?
All right. So we had a question about natural athletes and when it comes to boosting their testosterone levels. Yeah. Obviously, as bodybuilders, we want our testosterone, for guys especially, to be as high as it can, so that way they can gain more muscle. So what's the best knowledge that you can pass along to help people with that in the natural scene?
Yeah, well, the first thing is most people, when they hear me talk about this, they automatically are thinking John's going to talk about his hormone optimizer product that he sells. But supplements are the last thing that goes into a process that I use with my athletes, because as our listeners know, 90% of the athletes I work with that step on stage, they're doing natural shows, right? So this is something I have to really constantly keep an eye on. I have to make sure their test levels are good in the off season. I have to make sure they come back after a prep, 4 or 5 months after, make sure your levels are back up. So that way, you can grow and improve. Mm-hmm. So this is something I monitor very, very heavily. And yes, the hormone optimizer product that I sell is a part of that process, and it's been successful, but that's not the answer. It's just just take hormone optimizer. That's not it. the things that you have to remember about maximizing testosterone, male or female, is the enemy number one, right, is cortisol. And when cortisol is too high from things like low sleep or training 6 days a week or not taking deloads and like not doing all this stuff, and then you just got life stress on top of it, and the higher cortisol is, and we did a complete cortisol episode, it's episode 2. To me, it's probably the one everyone should start listening to is episode 2. If you're new to this podcast, go back, listen to episode 2. It goes into cortisol. Cortisol is enemy number 1 because to make cortisol, you're going to make less thyroid hormone, less testosterone, things of that nature, less progesterone for females. But when it's chronically high, that's why almost always I see our athletes have low test levels if they're not dieting, right? I'm talking about healthy off-season test levels. It's low because low sleep and all these things. So your body has to make more cortisol because it's chronically high. So the number one thing that you need to do is 1, improve sleep. And then 2, manage cortisol better. So like you might need to take some more days off. Like you can't train every single set, 10 out of 10 RPE to failure, drop sets, like all this different stuff where you're training like, an IFBB pro that weighs 250 pounds. It's loaded on gear. Like you can't recover like a lot of these guys, right? Or some of the elite women, you just can't. So you have to really think about taking a step back. And if you go back and listen to, see, it's weird. I remember most of the episodes. Episode 3 is maximizing your testosterone levels. Listen to that as well, because that'll go into detail on all of this. But in a nutshell, you've got to maximize your recovery time, and you've got to make sure that you're not under recovered. And that's the things that I look at with people. And sometimes it's taking a step back. Like I can't tell you how many clients I have that have low test levels. I'm like, hey, we got to drop our training down to like 3-4 days a week from 6, right? And they freak out. They're like, well, I'm not going to grow. And I'm like, well, hold on. You're not fucking growing because you don't have testosterone. Like it's too low. So if you keep training 6 days a week on low test, what do you think is going to happen? You're going to have cortisol so high, you're never going to get your test levels back up. And it's not because they're dumb. Like they want to train and they want to go push hard. And so I have to educate them. So that's always the number one thing that people have to remember. And you have to spend a long enough time away from dieting. That's the other thing people need to know is like, you can't diet for a show, get on stage, and then think you're going to put on new muscle or more muscle right after a show if you're natural, because it takes, for females, it takes 4, 5, 6 months to get those levels back up to the point to where, after a show, you're putting on lost muscle and you're putting that back on. And then as your test levels start to get back up into range, then you start putting new muscle on, or then you can start to try and put new muscle on. And as you know, Kayla, that takes a long time as a female. Well, guys, it's the same thing. Like you still need that time. So a lot of people they'll start dieting again. They want to do a show the exact time next year. Well, you've only had 6 months at your testosterone levels being back to normal. You didn't put on very much muscle. You may not have put any on at all. So that's the other thing. And then finally, yes, the supplement. So Hormone Optimizer is something I designed that drops cortisol, and there's test boosters in there that boost testosterone. So it's a 1-2 punch. And, I posted labs left and right of lots of guys jumping up 200-300 points. I'll get a lot of females like their testosterone's 8, and I can get them up to like 22, 24, like not super high. And it's natural. It's perfectly fine for like water testing and all that, but at least get you up to normal ranges. I've had a couple of people get decently high, but it's never going to put someone out of range. So those are things that natural athletes need to understand. And honestly, the best 1-2 punch is Cordy's with Hormone Optimizer because it drops cortisol. So to me, that's the ultimate test booster. Like I wish I could just combine those into 2, but it'd be like, 10 pills, and it's already quite a few. So that's something all natural athletes, you have to pay attention to your testosterone levels. And we used to never test back in the day. Like, you feel good. You start feeling good a couple months out, you're eating a bunch of food and you're training like hell, but all of a sudden it's just easier to get fat and you're not really gaining muscle size. Well, it's because our testosterone levels weren't back up. We weren't giving it enough time. But now with podcasts like this and, the PEC and the Elite Physique University seminars that we do, and even the Physique Summit, like we're able to get more of this information out. It's becoming more well-known for natural athletes, especially.
Yeah. I think that's the biggest thing, and like a really big overarching theme that everyone's going to hear when you guys first started and going forward is always fatigue management and cortisol, to make sure that those are down and that you can recover properly. Otherwise, you're just not going to make any progress, period, whether you're enhanced or not. So really the like PEDs just help people to recover faster, and that's why they can train more. But yeah, with natural athletes too, you know, you don't think, when I was competing, you know, before I got my lab work done, I had never even thought of that, like hormone levels and stuff and like stressing too much. I just was like in that mindset that like, I'm just going to go as hard as I can because I need to grow and I need to get bigger right now. So, you know, more is better, right?
Yeah. And I think a lot of people don't really think about testing until there's a problem. Like
Yep.
you start thinking, man, I just do not feel good. I'm not motivated. Like all these things happen. And at that point, now you're trying to fix something that's already a problem. We're trying to get information out to help people do, I call it preventative maintenance. That's what we call things in the Army. Like we would check all of our gear in the Army well before we ever went out into the field. And we called it preventative maintenance. So if you find like a little something wrong, you fix it then and there so it doesn't break down when you need it. So to me, hormone levels are something we're trying to teach preventative maintenance. Like start keeping an eye on it. If you're a year into bodybuilding, there's nothing wrong with going to check your labs. If you're a 22-year-old female, there's nothing wrong with that. Like you should go make sure you're in a good place and see what things like dieting and training, like see how they're impacting it. So
yeah. Which that kind of rolls into our next question that we got, was how to determine if someone's ready to compete or not. So I think, you know, in my case, I usually will tell my athletes, like, I won't prep you until I have some labs. Like I want to see, make sure that they're healthy first, because I went through that and I don't want that to happen to other people. And so I want to make sure that they're healthy, that I can diet them. You know, I want to see where their cardio is at, where their food's at with that. I want to be able to see, you know, are you doing 60 minutes of cardio every day already and eating, if you're a female, like 1,600 calories, like that's not going to do you very good, because then, you know, we go into a prep, you're not going to have very much to cut from. And so I want to make sure that their food's high. With that too, I want to see that they have a really consistent program and they've been doing it for a while. I want to make sure that they can follow it and they're not going to, you know, make excuses or be like, oh, life happened. Because, you know, when you commit to something like this, it's like a part-time job, you know, and competing and stuff, and it should be fun. So maintaining that consistency is going to be helpful for that. So another thing I look at too, like we said, with stress, I want to make sure that they're not like stressed out to the max, like doing 12 different things that they're committed to, that they can make time for this, because it is a lot of dedication and hard work that goes into it. And stress is just going to not help with fat loss either. So it's just going to stall them even more. And then you got to push harder. And especially if it's a new person, I want to make sure that they have a really fun experience, because I want them to come back and do it again.
100%.
I've seen it way too many times where people diet too hard because they just like don't know what they're getting into, and then they don't know the expectations and what's going to happen after. And then they have a really bad experience with blowing it out of the water a week after the show, and they gain everything back, and they're like have binge eating disorder behaviors and stuff like that happening. And so then I look at their mindset too, and I make sure that they're prepared, and I tell them this is going to be like one of the hardest things that you ever do. But it's also one of the most rewarding. So that's typically what I look at. How about you, John? Do you do anything different?
I mean, you nailed it. Like you really covered everything. And man, you did that fast too, because like we could literally make this a whole episode as well.
Yeah.
I really, the first thing that you said that always resonates with me, to me, the best coaches in the industry are always going to be the people that say that what you said at the beginning. You're like, I don't want people to make the mistakes that I made. And those mistakes make you who you are and the coach that you are, because you've learned from those mistakes. And now you have a platform and a way to teach and coach people based off of, this isn't right because I'm telling you it's right. It's right because I know, because I've done the other way. You know, I had someone got a hold of me, one of my clients for peak week. Like he really wanted to talk to me on the phone, and he's a great guy. And he started asking me questions. Hey coach, like no one's drinking water backstage at these shows, but you have me drinking water. So I'd explain it to him, and I was glad to do that. But I told him, listen, man, I've done it that way. Like I've done it 0 water, like Friday afternoon to like, until you're off stage, and like, it does not work well. And I explained that to him, but it's because I've done it all those ways and learned from the mistakes. Right. So that's the main thing that I like that you put out there. And one other little tidbit that I can throw in. So you covered cardio and food. One big thing that I like to do with my clients before they start a prep, and this is just so I can throw something in here and we can go on to the next one. I like to pull cardio completely out. Like some of us are fatties and we need to do some cardio in the off season, or like I need it for heart health, right?
Yeah.
But I've got some people just doing it so I can continue to get their food up so they can enjoy eating more. And I might have them doing 10 minutes of steady state a handful of times a week, maybe like one session of HIIT of like 3 to 5 intervals, nothing brutal, just on their high carb day. A month out, I'll have them pull all their cardio. That way their body's not used to cardio at all. And then the other thing I'll have them do is completely deload the week before the prep starts, because you mentioned cortisol and you don't want that sky high. I tell all my clients even before a mini cut in the summer, right? Like I've got people doing 4 to 6 weeks mini cuts. I'll have them do a deload before we start that, because then I'm going to push on them hard. And if cortisol is already really high, that deload's going to help. It's kind of like a cortisol reset, so to speak. Same thing.
Yeah.
Those are the things I kind of make sure that I do, but I gather all this information that you're talking about so I know when to do it. So I hope that kind of helps give people a couple of little pointers from things that I like to do.
Yeah. You mentioned that last part too, and that made me think of, when you start a prep, it should never be like this big event that's like, okay, I'm starting prep on this day and like a ton of stuff is going to change. Like you might, just changing up with programming, you put your programming down so that a deload happens and then you just roll right into it and you just change macros or food up a little bit, add a little bit of cardio, and then you're like in prep. If it feels like you're completely changing everything, you're probably not ready to start prep, because you shouldn't have to change everything. It should just kind of roll into it.
Yeah, he nailed it on the head again. The other thing too, now I'm thinking of a couple things, and mostly because in the last couple of weeks I've had a couple people message me about doing a show. And one wanted to diet down and do a photo shoot this fall, and then they want to do a show in the spring next year. And like there's cycles of dieting and people don't get it. And she needs to add more curves because her glutes aren't very big and her legs aren't very big. So like we need to spend time growing. So, I know someone's not ready to compete when also they need to add more muscle. And a lot of people get super excited. And this was me back in the day. I was like 155 pounds on stage, 5'10", way too skinny. I just wanted to be on stage. I just wanted to be a bodybuilder more than I wanted to actually listen to the people tell me, dude, you got to grow. Like you look like you have cancer up there. Like you don't look good. And I didn't look good. I was the world's worst bodybuilder. And, it's stuff like that I help my clients see. I'm like, hey, listen, I can diet you down, but you're not going to place very well. Like, do you want to place well? Let's grow. Like I've got you on this. So that's a hard conversation. And I know a lot of our coaches listening struggle with that because you fear you need a client, right? Like we need the money. Like this is how we make a living. You fear someone running from you and being like, no, I'm just going to go hire somebody who's just going to diet because that's what I want. If you educate them, they're actually going to appreciate that. I've had more people than not say, you know what? I'm glad you explained that to me. I'm going to go ahead and hire you because this is what I want from a coach. I want somebody that's going to be a coach. And that's another thing that I know someone's ready to compete when I see their physique and it looks like, okay, if we pull the fat off, like you're going to be able to stand up on stage and look like a bodybuilder because that's what it is. It's bodybuilding.
Yep. 100%. Like, again, I think we could do a whole episode on this and really go into it because I could add on more to that. But
oh yeah, for sure.
But we'll leave the listeners hanging and we'll just do it on another episode.
There we go.
All right. So next question was all about deloads. So do you guys think that deloads or a week off is beneficial, and what do you do with your clients as far as that goes?
I'm kind of excited to talk about something that's not really that exciting of a topic, but I'm excited because you're here, because I can talk to you because you have a powerlifting background and I do too, but nowhere near what you have, right? Like, yeah, I was with Leslie for a long time and like she, helping her with her preps, and I would do her diets and stuff like that. And I was very familiar with her powerlifting journey and the training and the deloads that were needed. So, I mean, I know a lot about the topic, but I also have applied a lot of that to bodybuilding. So I'll be interested to see what your take is after I get mine real quick. So with my clients in the off season, first of all, everybody does a deload because what I do is I purposefully overreach, which means I push them to the point where they have to take a deload. And I learned that because in powerlifting, you've got these blocks and maybe it's 4 weeks at a time. Like you progressively add weight and you get heavier and you're getting close to, hitting 90% of your 1 rep max, for example, or maybe even 95 or whatever. And you get real, real heavy and it's really, really hard and it taxes your central nervous system just to the point you need a week to chill out so you can recover. Well, I applied that. And what happens after a deload in powerlifting is now you come back and you start over and you try and get stronger in that next 4 weeks, for example. And then you push till you have to take another deload and it helps your strength go up. Well, I applied that to my bodybuilders and I don't focus so much on weight. I focus on training to ultra failure and actually adding some sets. So what I'm doing is raising volume, total sets, basically, training to failure, and we're going to push for 2 weeks, like harder than they've pushed the whole time. And then at that point, they should, inflammation's high, their sleep isn't as great, they're tired, their strength is taking a hit. We're purposefully overreaching. And then we deload for a whole week. And what happens is they can rest, they can recover, and they come back, they're ready to train again, but they notice their strength starts to go up. And that should translate to new muscle gain. Because if you just train the same all the time, like you're not going to gain as much muscle. So I've adopted that theory for the last, and I say it's a theory because no one's studied it in bodybuilding, so to speak, that I'm aware of, but it's really helped my clients get stronger and add muscle. And it's not the same thing all the time. So like they've got a deload week to look forward to. They've got the overreaching weeks and all these things. And it's a process. So like every 4 to 5 weeks, I'll say, all right, let's start 2 weeks of overreaching and then let's deload on week 3. And then we're going to start the process over. And I've seen great results from it. Now the deload week to me looks like 2 days off or 2 days of training. And that's it. I tell them like, hey, go do an upper body day and a lower body day. Just go train high rep and get a pump. Like just go have fun. Like do whatever the hell you want. Just go in there and have fun and then take the other days off to completely recover. So I typically stick to a deload versus a week off, but I think there's a great moment in time where people need a week off if stress is really high, if they're having any kind of thoughts that they may be suffering a minor injury or something's tweaked, like I've got a shoulder that just needs a complete week off. So rarely do I do a week off with somebody unless it's warranted. I like to stick with a deload with just a couple days of training. So, but what about you? Because this is really right in your wheelhouse. What do you think?
Yeah, this is like something super fun that I like to talk about. So because of my background, I kind of like to have like, I guess like a mix of both, because I have found that they complement each other in both scenarios between a bodybuilder and a powerlifter. So especially with a new bodybuilder, they're going to benefit from the compound movements because they usually need to gain some more muscle density. So in an off season, typically I'll run like 6 weeks on and then like a week deload. And then we'll just do kind of progressive overload that way. I like to start with a more compound movement, depending on their experience level too. If they're a newer lifter, I'll progress them up to that if they're not ready for something like that. But so we'll basically overreach, like you said, usually increasing reps every week, or increasing weight little by little. And if they have a training partner, to do some kind of drop set with a couple forced reps at the end too. I like to add those in as well if I can on a couple sets. And then I just listen to them too. If they're really feeling it and if they just had a hard week, I'll put the deload earlier and stuff. And then usually I'll change out a few exercises to see where their physique is lacking, where we need to add more size to, exercises that they connect with a lot better. And then for my power lifters, what I do for an off season, for example, I run 6 weeks again. I'll use their compound movements and we'll work up to a top set of like 2 to 4 usually, and then I'll do a back off set with more volume but lighter weight. So that way they can still have that fatigue management and they don't completely overload their CNS, because that's where I got into trouble. Was I used to train conjugate style and it worked really well for me. I loved it because I got to, so conjugate, basically you do one movement variation a day and then you max that out and then you do your accessories after that. And so you only get to practice like one heavy movement for the day. So it doesn't really help with like muscle growth by any means, but I got way stronger. So I take that concept a little bit and then I do a top set of like 2 to 3. So it's still submax so that they're not completely overloading their CNS. And then we do more volume because I work with a lot more raw lifters too. So they need the volume to get stronger. And then with their accessories, I do them more bodybuilding style, where it's going to be, connect with the movement, make sure you're doing them slow, make sure you're staying within the range of motion, not keeping muscle tension in there too. So during a meet prep though, I will go 3-week waves. So we do 3 weeks on, working up each week, and then we do a deload week, and then we switch out the main exercise. So it's that same concept, just a little bit smaller, just because we're in a more of a time crunch with peaking for strength. It's a little different than peaking for bodybuilding, of course, but yeah.
So there's so much meat on the bone with this topic. I really want us to do, it's funny, we say this after each question, so we're going to have a whole episode on, and you're the one keeping track of it now. So I mean, we really do need to do one on implementing powerlifting into bodybuilding and what's good and what's not good, because I've seen a lot of things that just do not work well. And even things with like power building and like, I like someday, go ahead and reach out to Mike O'Hearn and maybe get him on the show. Like he's somebody good that has his own system that he's seen really work well over the years. And we need to cover a lot of different training styles. And I liked what you went into, like some of your favorite ways to train. This is a good topic.
Yeah. I think Stan Efferding would have a really good viewpoint on that as well too, because he's world's strongest bodybuilder, right?
I met Stan in Las Vegas. Leslie was the very first Super League pro. I don't think Super League's around anymore. It's a great concept. Mike O'Hearn, Dorian Yates was even a part of it. Like it was a really big deal out in Vegas, and she was the first pro, and she competed in that thing like 4 or 5 times. And we met Stan out there. Just a super nice guy, extremely knowledgeable, especially when it comes to training. But that guy's he could talk about any of the stuff we're talking about now, like anything in detail. The guy is just super smart. So he's another one I would definitely like to get on the show. So we'll see what we can do.
Yeah. I definitely do have to say though too, like this last year when I was competing and stuff in 2021, I had so many compliments on my back. Everyone's like, man, your back is awesome. Like you just have really good back thickness. And I 100% attribute that to the like 1.5 years, 2 years, 2 years of powerlifting that I did, because it brings up your muscle density highly especially in the back, because you use your back for all of those movements.
Yeah. And especially someone like you that understands a bodybuilding approach too on how to use those, because there's going to be a lot of negative aspects I can point out to when people focus too much on the powerlifting side and not enough about, hey, what's the goal using this for bodybuilding? But anyway, we'll get into that in another episode.
Yes. All right. Last question also pertains to training. But we do all these things online. Usually I do a little bit of in-person stuff as well, but how basically do we implement training with a new lifter who hasn't really trained before, and how do we work with them in the online presence versus in person? So I guess I'll start with that one, because I do that a lot with my power lifters and stuff. Sure. Is what I do is I have them send me videos. When I have the call with them, I make sure to ask their experience level, if they've ever competed before. I'll ask them, how well they did, all those things, their background. And I'll usually start with like a progression program. So I want to start them typically 4 days a week, just like a squat day, a bench day, a deadlift day, and then a back and accessories day. So that's how we split it up in there versus like push, pull, legs kind of thing.
Right.
So I want to just make sure that they're, going to be safe when they do it. So I'll start them with just as simple as like a kettlebell goblet squat, like honestly. And then with deadlifts, I'll start them with like a block pull, and I'll have them take videos and send them to me. So I use an app, a Telegram app, just to have conversations with them, and then they'll send me their videos. I'll review them for them. I'll even pull it up on Loom and show them like exactly like what I'm talking about. Like, hey, when you set up your deadlift, make sure you screw your shoulders in and you pull your lats tight before you pull the bar off the floor. So I'll give them little tips here and there. And then as we progress, I will, they have to earn that right to move up to pulling the bar from the floor or adding more weight to the bar. Because with powerlifting, it's a very big thing of respecting the weight, because you can and will get hurt if you don't, if you just have a big ego and just go at it. So, and my biggest job is just to make sure that they're safe and they're doing it correctly. So I want to make sure that they're doing okay before they move on.
Yeah, and that's that. You can definitely tell that you've got a deep powerlifting background as well as bodybuilding, because you're very specific, making sure that you want to make sure that they're doing the movements correctly, which is very important there. My approach is a little bit different, not right, not wrong, just different because of where I'm at in my coaching career. Because at this point, what I do with my clients is if I have someone that's new, I've written so many training programs, and I've tried them all myself, and I've tried them on clients for like the last 15 years. Um, the books that I've written, like the programs are in there, right? So like I've got upper body, lower 4 days a week. Like I've got a 5 day a week split. I've got an advanced bodybuilding split, like all these different ones. When I gather someone's information, if I have someone that's new, I start them on one of my beginner programs. Like I don't write them very specific, unless they say they're injured or there's something they can't do, then I will change the workout for them. But if everybody's cleared, which is most of the people that work with me, and they're new, I'm going to start them on a beginner plan, 3-4 days a week, probably a 4 day a week split, just so they can get fat off faster. And then I progress them over time as they become more advanced. And I've got another set of workouts that I will give to them. But the workouts are pretty much the same for most people in the beginning when they're new, because they're new. When I get someone that's a little bit more advanced, I like to give them a split, and I tell them how many sets, what rep ranges to do. But I actually make my athletes, and a lot of people listening to this might be like, well, why would you make them pick their own exercises? It's actually what I found to be better, because I'm trying to teach them, right? And because I've got all these other businesses, like if they're advanced enough, I'm not going to look at their videos. Like if they want to send them, I will certainly look at them, and I do that all the time. But I don't make them do it, because I make them pick the exercises that, number one, they feel the best, they work best in the muscle. So with bodybuilding, it's a lot about mind muscle connection. So I tell them, hey, if you're going to do 4 exercises for chest today, I want you to start off with your first 2 that you feel better than any other chest exercise, because you're going to wear the muscle out and have better mind muscle connection first. And then the other 2 exercises at the end, you're going to feel better because you're already pre-exhausted. So I make them pick the exercise that fit best and they feel best, because, if someone does not feel the bench press worth a shit, like they're just mechanically built in a way that the bench press doesn't feel good to them, I'm not going to make them go do it when they can go hit the hammer press machine, the Life Fitness, plate loaded hammer press, and they feel that great. We'll do that. I don't put value over a bench press versus a hammer, not for bodybuilding, right? Now, if they're going to train and they're going to do a powerlifting meet and they have to bench, squat, bench, deadlift, you better be doing those movements. But for me, for bodybuilding, that's the way I've taken it. And I give them free reign to switch exercises out. And the other thing too is sometimes it's busy in the gym and you can't get on the hammer press machine. Well, you better know how to go switch something out. Like, so I'm trying to ultimately teach my clients how to think, and not make it to where they freak out and they send me an email and be like, hey, like somebody's on this, like, what do I do next? So I always put in my programs, I'm like, hey, feel free to change this out. Feel free to add some bands. Like if you want to add bands to the leg press or the leg curl, you're going to be sore as hell, but add those, like try something new. So my approach is a little bit different, but it's because I'm 15 years in and, I'm trying to be more of a teacher. Right. And because I don't have those clients that have to send me, you've got to see your clients doing that, because if they do the movement wrong, it's not good. Like they're not going to make the progress they want. I just don't have a lot of people doing the movements to where they have to perform them like a squat, bench, deadlift at a meet, for example.
Right. Yeah. And I don't have all of my clients send me things, but I like how you do that. And because I do run into that too sometimes, where they're like, oh, well, this wasn't available, or is it okay if I switch out this for this, or what do I switch it for? And I'm like, well, what muscle does it work? Like, do the same similar thing. You don't have to do that exact machine if you don't have it. And then that's another thing too, is not everyone has the same gym setup or the same equipment. So that can also be a challenge too when writing programming for people. But
yeah. So like if I have an athlete, like I have a lot of athletes like you, right? Pretty advanced, like they're going to step on a pro stage. I'm going to come at them with a certain approach. Like I'm going to have certain rep ranges, and I'm going to have them maybe do pre-exhaust and train their weakest body parts on certain days, paired up or not paired with something. And, certain ways to bring up a certain body part. So that really, to me, is the magic of working with somebody, is understanding what the most important body parts are, what's the best approach they can take with their training, and what rep ranges, what day. somebody's trying to bring their chest up, for example, I'd rather not see them train chest, shoulders, and triceps all on the same day. I'd rather them just train their chest that day. That way, all the food that they're eating and the protein is going to repair just the chest that day. But if they've trained chest, shoulders, and triceps, now that food is spread over trying to repair 3 body parts. So to bring the chest up, I like to pair it on its own day and twice a week. And then I also like to give the chest higher volume than other body parts. So that also makes it grow. So that's a lot of where the quote unquote magic or the strategy is for my athletes. Because I mean, Kayla, say you and I were working together, you don't need me to tell you, hey, I need you to do this exact movement here and there. I'm going to be like, hey, you go crush the ones you feel the best. And you walk out there feeling like there's such a deep mind muscle connection, it's going to tear off the bone. Like, you know what to go do. So, and that's a lot of the athletes I get who are advanced. So it just makes it a well-oiled machine on my end.
Yeah. Yep. 100%. I love it. So, well, that was all of our questions for today. That was like, we could have gone on forever, I feel like, with all of those.
You did a great job. You kept us organized. Actually, those questions flowed together well. Now we've got a whole bunch of other full episode topics that we can talk about. Man, this was good. I like it. I like just answering questions. This is good.
Yeah, 100%. We should, we'll definitely be putting up more questions for people to ask anytime they have them. But yeah, if you guys ever have any questions, all of our emails, John, Jason, and I are down below. Make sure you guys, I'm going to plug Phat Muscle Supplements from John, NuEthix Supplements, and Advanced Vitality HRT from Jason as well. So all that's in the show notes. Otherwise, we will see you guys next time.
See you guys soon. Oh, and Kayla, when Jason's back on the show, I'm going to need you to have some questions for him that bring out red ass Jason, because we all need to see red ass Jason. So maybe the all caps, except we'll get to see it in person. Deal?
I got it. I got this. 100%.
All right. We're out of here. See you guys.
See you guys.